Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it. So, welcome to The First Turn. I'm the Hyena.
I'm Llama.
And
Llama. I haven't even had that many times.
I know. We're having a hot day here today. Yep. We've got some cool hard lemonade to sip on today. The heavy stuff. Yep. Courtesy of Mike.
Yep. What a guy.
It's nice to have every once in a while. It's a trashy drink, no offense, but it is damn satisfying. On a hot day especially, I'm a little dehydrated, so it's gonna really pep me up.
So why not have
alcohol
when you're dehydrated?
So today we are talking about more AOS.
Oh, no way.
So we've had it is the season, where summers are usually big change times. I guess mostly because it's lulls in production and other kind of tournament scenes have a lull. It's a good time to put a new edition out.
It is.
And so we've got that coming up here in a few weeks. We don't have a solid date yet. Maybe we'll find out this weekend if something's coming.
We originally suspected July when some of the Skaven War Scrolls were shown and a July 24 stamp was on it, and then they removed it in the next image.
Well, and then we were also thinking, well, how perfect would it be to at the wrap up of all these faction previews is that we had the starter box and AOS 4 drop right at the end. But it looks like we're going to at least have 1 week gap between the when we've seen the rules for every army, at least a teaser, and when the edition comes out. We're going to have a little bit of a gap apparently. But it could be this weekend. We get some pre-order next week kind of thing.
Might be, or at the very least. So I think they might do it slightly different than what we saw with 40K 10th. I think there will be a similar timetable where the starter box comes out and there's about 3 months before Battle Tomes hit. But we might not see what extra the Stormcast and Skaven in particular are going to get until after the starter set drops.
That's true. You're right.
And then I think, because I know they're going to get more models. They have to be. Just by verbiage and by what is being cut. But yeah, they haven't shown us any of that yet.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that they've been so tight-lipped about it. Because, even the leaks we saw that for, Skaven were just the stuff that was in the starter box before we saw it. It wasn't, extra beyond. And so I think that's exciting. Like I said, we'd seen some faction previews, though, this week that were new. Mixed bag. Most of it's...
I think most of them are fine.
Most of it, the army, I think, does what you want it to do. I think we see some external balance issues, though, in a couple of things. Namely, how the Chaos factions that we've seen are going to function compared to one another. Specifically, we don't have the full picture of what an army does.
No.
We have a little snippet. But Tzeentch has an army rule that is suspiciously similar to Nurgle's disease rule. Only it's easier to get disease off, and it spreads more. It's like the same thing as Tzeentch's rule, but better in every single way.
Oh, the Nurgle one you think is better? Okay.
Way better. Because it spreads from one unit to the other. Yeah. It doesn't have a chance of dropping off like the Tzeentch one does. So the Tzeentch's burning ability only applies from specific spells and specific weapons when they hit a target. It's not every target that gets hit by it. It's, of all the targets hit by this, choose one.
Yeah.
And it's that ain't great. That's not great, especially because it has a chance of extinguishing on your next turn. So really, the maximum number of units that you can engulf in flames and apply the burning effect to is 5. Barring some Overwatch shenanigans you can do. But it's 5 units, and then you have a really good chance every turn of multiple of them dropping off and just dissipating.
And I wonder though if that's accounting for some sort of trade-off.
Maybe.
And what I mean is, like we observed in Total War. So Tzeentch has something Nurgle doesn't. Speed and range.
Sure.
And so I wonder if they're factoring that, and they thought if they give them the same ability to spread and keep stuff on fire, you could have discs kiting around and just setting the world in
I think
place.
they've already kind of limited that by what weapons have the keyword that cause the flame.
Yeah. I was happy as someone who owns a Maggot army. I liked what I read in their little preview.
It's super good, but that's the thing is it might be too good.
Maybe
I think it's better than what they had before, honestly. their
It's
disease
cleaner,
their disease
for sure.
course. Super
That's
clean.
clean. Nurgle,
Yeah.
it could be clean.
And so like it's definitely cleaner. I like the changes they made to some of the war scrolls we saw. I was really hoping to see not Tamerkin. Jeez, total war on the brain. The Glotkin. I was hoping to see them, which we did not see.
No.
Because normally they've been doing faction leaders, right? And I was like, oh, we're gonna get the Glotkin. We got a great and clean one. Not even the named great and clean one, which is weird. But we got a great and clean one. When we saw the war scroll for Future Blight Kings, which is, I think, a marked improvement. Upon the previous.
I thought even the Harbinger. Of Death, the Lord on Steed looked way better.
Not a fighty powerhouse.
No.
But he kind of shouldn't be.
Well, and he's got the priest.
Yep. He's both a priest and he's a little fighty, and you don't have to worry about choosing weapon options for him anymore like you did previously.
Right.
One of the biggest issues he had before was whichever weapon you took, you got an upside and then a massive downside. Like the one weapon option, he just couldn't fight.
Yeah.
Really. So if you wanted to fight, you like give up this cool aura. So it was like, ugh. Now you kind of get the best of both worlds. You don't have to choose. It just says whether you have the sword or the scythe, whatever. You get the other thing with the aura and the priest's abilities, and you get to fight and just here's 3 flat 3 damage attacks.
And the Nurgle army has wards everywhere.
Yes, which is super cool.
The Blight Kings having it was huge.
Yeah, and I was surprised they actually gave them a 3+ save.
3+, 5+, yeah.
Which again, with the idea behind this edition's design of look at a model and give them stats that feel appropriate for what they look like.
Tough does that look?
I don't think they made them feel like they look, because most of them aren't wearing armor. One guy is in the unit of 5. Like one guy's got a breastplate and full plate armor, but the majority of them have like just a pauldron and exposed bellies and arms. It's like, majority of the unit should have a 4-up save. Maybe the unit should have a 4. With the 5-up ward that they have on top of that, probably would have been fine, I think.
They do have shields.
Do they?
Yeah.
I thought the Lord has a shield. I thought the normal guys didn't.
No, they come with shield options.
Okay.
And I mean,
so maybe that's okay.
And again, we don't have a toughness characteristic.
True.
Right. Now, I do think that was a big boost to them durability wise.
Yeah.
Although we'll see what that means in 4. But
they took a lot of their damage output away. If you notice, they only had like a handful of attacks, like 3 attacks per guy at 1 damage.
Yeah, they don't get to 5.
They don't get to explode. They don't have base 5 attacks. They don't like get chances to spread disease on cookies.
And there could end up something in one of their battle formations that does it. There could end up a hero that does that for them because they've got a myriad of heroes.
Yeah.
But yes, their base stat card, they were tougher than they were fighty.
Mm-hmm.
And that could just end up what we see in Nurgle, especially since their disease thing.
We did see the plague demons. Oh my gosh. Plague Bearers.
It was the Slappity Biopiper we saw too.
We saw the Plague Bearers though in terms of the Vanguard box. What is it called? Oh my gosh, Spearhead box.
Yes.
We saw what their stats looked like in that, and we know that for the most part, most of the stats we see in Spearhead, the stat line itself is the same as the normal. So we don't know what the rules will be.
Yeah.
But we do know that like they are 2 wound models. They've got some feel no pains. They're not fighty at all.
Nope.
A Plague Bearer has 1 attack,
mm-hmm.
but 2 wounds. So that's, it shows off the durability of Nurgle and maybe not the damage output of them.
Yeah,
maybe you rely on getting stuck in and spraying the disease and dealing mortal damage.
They want to sit there and make you hit them, and then you're taking all kinds of damage.
Yeah.
Unique way to play, and maybe for some people that's not fun because they like offense, but it is a different way to play, and it's kind of what you think of with Nurgle.
Yeah.
You don't think of a
great thematic
one moving quick,
mm-hmm.
And so even with him, they gave him fewer attacks that are high damage, but he deals out all sorts of plaguey damage.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I liked those 2 a lot. The
Imperial Knights. I mean the
Gargants.
Sons of Behemoth.
I'm just not crazy about the design on them. Mostly because it doesn't feel like they did that much.
Monsters Rampage, Monsters Rampage, Monsters
Rampage.
Rampage.
I mean, but the Monster Rampages they have were basically abilities they already had, just rolled now into Monsters Rampages. And like their damage outputs on their weapons were all pretty much the same as they are now. They had stat lines that were exactly the same as they used to be. Like nothing changed there. King Broad is still 40 wounds.
Mm-hmm.
A regular Mega Gargant's still 35.
Yeah.
Like that's a massive health pool in this game, And it's like it feels like less effort went into seeing how they should be balanced compared to everyone else. You know what I mean? So it's just I don't know. It feels not lazy, but like with that many factions, it feels like some things had to be just rushed through to get them done. This feels like a casualty of that, where it's like, well, shit, we got everything else done. Let's quickly just get through these guys.
I'll tell you what, though. Yndrasta would love to see a field full of them. Yeah. It's good gravy does she hurt monsters.
Yes, she does. Yes, she does.
Yeah.
And some of their wording has changed, right?
And they gave... I do feel like the Mega Gargants seem a little more role specific even than they were before. Sure. Whereas they used to just be kind of like general damage piles. Like they really want the Stomper to only fight infantry, and they really want the Gatebreaker to beat up faction terrain, and they or Gatecrasher or whatever they call him.
Which he does do.
And you know, without what was different with Broad is he does a lot of like almost priest style aura stuff.
Well, he is a priest.
Yeah.
So I mean that checks.
Like yes, his hammer hits for a bunch, but he's more of
flat 5.
He does more of like boost the army for however many you're going to be able to fit in an army.
Yeah. Which is neat. I mean, I do like that. He is the faction leader after all. He should be able to do something for them. But like,
was he in any of the Dawnbringer stories?
Not that I can recall. They might have mentioned him, but I don't think he was featured in any really. So
they didn't show off the Kraken Eater.
No, they can't show off everything. I mean, the army doesn't have that many things.
No,
and so like showing off 3 things, it's like, well, they left this one out. That's because that's all they have.
Yeah, they had to leave something out.
So
I wouldn't be surprised if they. I mean, they technically have 2 kits now, which they could just release as one.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they got another kit like Knights did.
Yeah.
Where when they got the core kit, second time around the core kit was expanded, and then third time around they got the Dominus and whatever kit.
Well, I'm pretty sure the King Broad box does come with all of the Gargant parts. So you can make any Gargant out of his box.
And his sprue.
Yeah, so he was kind of an upgrade to the normal Gargant box anyway. And so, like, I don't think they sell the other one anymore. It's just all King Broad.
Right.
With 4 variants.
And that's why I wouldn't be surprised if they made a second one. Yeah. That makes, like, a different pose.
That'd be cool.
But
what else do we see? We saw Ideneth, and they looked solid.
Yeah, they did.
I was not mad at anything Ideneth had. Very similar to what they had before.
They just need a bigger roster.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's a few armies that that's all they're suffering from. They have decent rules. There's just not enough unit options.
Because you know that even if the rules are cool and they're going to be able to play in any situation, casual or competitive, it's like, but you're going to see the same 5 units because that's all they have.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Yep, it is. But there's hope.
I do believe every army will get their expansion. GW is committed to AOS.
Yeah.
And we've seen that they're willing to expand some of these, so I don't know. And I think they're down to a few that really need that roster doubling.
Like 4?
Yeah.
I think.
And they're one of them.
Lumineth, let's just go through that. Lumineth, Caradron, Fireslayers.
Not Lumineths.
Ideneth.
Yes.
The fish people. Ideneth, for sure.
Both dwarves.
Fireslayers and Caradrons. Yep. And then I think there's like one more that I'm not thinking
Maybe. But ogres, I think, need
a
little bit.
Sure. But they just need a refresh.
Theirs is they have so many old kits. Yeah. So they would need, but even then they could expand them. Who knows? You know, it's like, but yeah, they're down to just a few that really need that roster doubling kind of thing, which only takes a handful of kits. Yeah. And that would just feel so good. You'd have 24 factions that just sing, and that would be great.
Yeah, agreed. But we also saw Ghosts. They looked real good.
Yeah, they did.
They might be a late book because their rules look real good.
They look strong.
Which are the Night Haunt. We see
Ossiarch Bone Reapers when this show comes out.
Will be tomorrow. Yeah. Yep. So tomorrow when you listen to this, if you listen to us on day of, Bone Reapers should be out. We should know what they're looking like. We also had Flesh Eater Quartz. That's right. That was the last one.
They looked really good.
Who looked very good too. A lot of army synergy within that. They had gotten their roster expanded to the point where, like, I think they're a full army. Because they were one of the ones that was like, there's a few.
It was just old carryovers from Fantasy.
And now you've got the armed ghouls. Mm-hmm. You've got the cavalry, which again, when I think of a complete army, it's like, well, do you have a monster? Do you have cavalry? Do you have elite and basic infantry? And do you have enough support characters to support them all?
Right, to play different styles.
Now I think yes, that army is covered.
Oh yeah, their roster like Seraphon got a nice injection. I could see so far. I think of the Grand Alliances, Death looks the strongest out the gate, and it's just on paper with what we have. There could end up the way the missions play. Maybe it's not. But on paper, I thought Death has looked really strong, and we'll see more tomorrow.
Well, just built-in ward saves on everything, which they should have because they've always had it. But now it's not locked to taking an army with a specific allegiance, and if you bring an ally, you don't get it. All that. Now it's just you have just a ward on your war scroll.
Yeah, you
Perfect.
Have like no armor, armor. You have a ward.
How it should have been.
Yep.
Right. That's how it's always should have been.
And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the demon-heavy chaos factions see that.
Yeah.
As well.
Where it's like you don't have much of a save, but you have a ward.
Yeah, so you always get a chance to deflect.
And I'd be fine if that's what the unholy vitality or the supernatural eldritch mysticism of an army imbues them with it bestows them with, right? Like you don't have the armor per se like other armies do, but you get the chance to just negate all damage. Mm-hmm. That's a decent trade-off,
right? And it's on a worse roll typically.
Yep.
But
and at this point, I don't think it's even a downside to it.
Nope.
Really, because unless you can stack a save plus a ward, which is objectively better than just having a ward.
Like Future Blight Kings, right?
There isn't the ways to buff armor saves anymore, right?
And
armor was so good before.
And I hope that's not because they just haven't shown us that.
Right.
I really hope they don't have all these ways to stack saves, and this is what they're doing. You're usually getting armor or wards.
I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that they said specifically there isn't all that defense. There isn't, all these quick +1s to save abilities. Those are gone. Because now even a Mystic Shield only gives a 6-up ward save now.
Well, and for those of us who've played it, I say played, and others out there who played Age of Sigmar, how frustrating was it when you have your unit, your offensive unit, buffed to the 9s, so they've got rend -3, multiple damage per, and you run into a unit that's got a 2-up save, and they've got +1 from Mystic Shield, they got +1 from cover, they got +1 from an aura nearby, and then you're like, well, your rend -3 means I'm still on a 2-up save.
A 2+ save. Roll your 5 damage, or roll your 5 saves, make them all.
Yeah.
Your buffed out unit that you took a real gamble to charge in and deal some damage just did nothing to the opponent.
Yeah.
And usually when you sacrifice your buff slots to go offensive, you have to give up your defensive ones. And so while you just bounced off the opponent, they attack back at you with just standard stat lines, and you don't have the defensive buffs, so their damage actually gets through. Yeah, it's rough. It's really rough.
It made some units that could have defenses stacked on them feel more offensive because of that exact scenario.
There were battle line units in Stormcast that can do that. Yeah. And it was just absurd.
And so I think this so far feels a lot better. I would rather there's less stat modifiers in the game that require bookkeeping and doing that kind of math of 3s and pluses.
And that's the streamlining of the game that I want to see.
Yeah.
Because that makes things quicker to me. Something like how they're flattening mortal damage to be roll a D3. On a 2 on a 2+ on a D3, you deal that many mortal that much mortal damage.
So 2/3 of the time you do mortal damage and it's 2 or 3.
And it's like but that's a little weird to me because adding 1 dice roll is not slowing the game out that much. Right? They all doing all the math before of like, well, what's your save? I get this modifier, your rend is this, and like doing all that math and like that's what slowed the game down. Mm-hmm. Rolling 1 extra dice to determine how much mortal damage you took was not the culprit. They could have left that, I think, to have more of a variance with how much mortal damage you're dealing with an ability. They could have left that. They didn't, and they made everything kind of the same. Whenever you deal D3 damage now, it's now like on a chance on a D3, and you deal just whatever you roll, that's how much it does. Which is like, oh, okay. Like, unnecessary, but it does speed the game up a hair.
I think it also disincentivizes people from building lists solely around their exploding mortal damage spikes.
I mean, look at Ogres last edition, right? You get Ogres that are making these long bomb charges and rolling just buckets of damage on the impact and wiping out units without even having to swing. Because you're like, well, 2 units charged you. I made 2 10-inch rolls. Let me roll all these dice.
20 dice, yeah.
Take 12 mortal wounds on the charge before I swing at you.
Your unit's wiped out.
And then a small unit would just be dead without even getting to do anything. And then those chargers are safe.
Or your monster.
Or your monster's dead even, because most monsters had 10 or 12 wounds. Yeah. The 2 ogres units could just charge them and kill them. Or an ogre plus a character with a big name that made him do mortal wounds on a 3+. Right. That kind of thing. It just wasn't fun. Now they're reduced how much damage they can do. They do their bites at the end. They deal their, once per game heal and bite you ability. Like, there's mortal wounds galore in the ogre army.
Yeah.
But now it's not all front loaded. Relying on you rolling massive amounts of dice on charge. But they've kind of toned that down all across the board. One of the biggest problems with fighting against the Night Haunt was that if they made a 10-inch unmodified charge, they got to fight twice. They got to fight immediately against you and then fight again later. It was an egregious ability. And, I mean, it hasn't been a problem in a while. But, like, when the design first came out with that ability, it was like, why? You could have just said, if I make my 10-inch charge, I get fights first. And that already would have been powerful.
Very powerful.
Right? I get to fight you no matter what before you fight me. And all my guys that make the 10-inch charge all get to fight you before you get to choose. Massively powerful.
So on the leaked Lumineth stuff, which, by the way, usually when leaks happen, GW is quick to respond. So what surprised me is why they didn't decide to just swap out a faction focus day for them. But, which makes me wonder how accurate the leaks were, right? They look pretty official. But,
so what did you see for leaks?
Well, what I'm asking is, we saw that they may have a frightening amount of ability to shoot, even in combat.
Yep.
And that just might be their thing. Now, a lot of their melee stats seem to be kind of garbage.
I don't know. On their dedicated melee units, it seemed pretty good.
But dedicated melee units
don't get shooting.
Yeah. I'm saying on the shooty ones, their attacks in combat a lot of times were like 4s, 1, whatever. Yeah. And so I don't care if you use your bow then. And even then, you don't use the bow stats in combat. It just means that you still get your shooting attack.
On your turn.
Yeah. So it's not as egregious as I originally thought. But are they still going to have strikes first everywhere?
They have the ability, because they showed off in their thing, that they get to choose 2 units every time they choose instead of 1. Okay. That's their speed
equivalent of strength, kind of.
So it's like if I have 2 units in combat, I get to fight with one of them on my turn, and then I get to fight with another one immediately. Then you choose, and then I get to choose again. I get to choose 2 units before you get to choose another one.
So
I think they will likely have some fights first units in their army.
Or abilities somewhere.
Or abilities, yeah.
Because my concern, if I can have one this early, is that they were going to be easily the best shooting army in the game because they can shoot when they're locked or when someone's touching them. But then they also have a bunch of units that get to fight first anyway.
There's only a handful of units that get to do that. The fights first we've seen has only been when the unit charges. They get to fights first. Which there is some counter-charging things in the game that you get to charge in your opponent's turn, which would then allow you to fight first, potentially. That's a pretty big benefit. But the units that get to shoot in combat were limited. The ones that probably should be able to shoot in combat, right? Your Tornado Fox.
Yep.
Your Hurricane Wind Spirit.
Yeah.
You can't pin down a Wind Spirit. No. It's free. And wild.
Don't need a ticket.
It can just shoot you in combat.
To ride
but it's going to be an expensive,
he's going to be,
squishy, somewhat squishy, but fast, monster. And it's it can shoot in combat, fine.
That doesn't bother me.
What it was weird to me is the Kangaroo Riders could shoot in combat. That was a weird choice. They had that ability. It's they're just elves riding kangaroos.
So is the logic supposed to be that a melee unit's stuck fighting the kangaroo and the elf on top can still...
I guess. I mean, maybe that's the idea. We haven't seen enough of it to know.
No.
Right? We know some spell-like abilities, Green Puke for the weird shaman, can be shot in combat. But then the Ethermantic Blast from some other wizard can't be used in combat. Was it the Sylvaneth? Did we see Sylvaneth yet?
I don't think so.
It was one of the a monster in some other army that has a gaze or a breath ability, can't use it in combat.
Might have been one of the
so it's a little inconsistent of when a monster can shoot in combat, especially when it's a breath weapon or a gaze. They look at you in combat and they deal shooting damage. It's some of the stuff is not consistent. So from what we've seen though, shooting infantry don't get the opportunity to do that.
Which is huge.
Which I think is the biggest one.
It is.
Right. So
because that's what you can have the highest numbers of.
Right.
And we saw through Age of Sigmar's earlier iterations that the most egregious shooting wasn't a character with bomb stats.
Right.
It was when you could have a block of 20 guys.
Well, I can bring 3 20-man blocks of guys who can shoot from 30 inches away.
And I have a way to buff their hit and to give them mortal wounds on 6s, and
It's absurd.
that became a problem.
Yeah.
So maybe it won't be as bad as we thought.
They also changed, I believe, the archers for Lumineth so that they don't just do mortal damage anymore. I think their wounds are lethal, or their shots are lethal, so their critical hits now just make you make a save. They don't
they
just don't ignore your save
Yeah.
roll anymore. Like they used to before. It used to be mortal damage. Now it's just make a save, which is way better. Like that's so much better, right? A basic infantry archer unit from across the board should not be able to like, all right, well I rolled well enough, your entire unit's dead without you being able to do anything. Like that feels so bad. Or your character who they can barely see, but all I'm relying on is rolling those unmodified 5s and 6s to deal mortal damage to him. Just dies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I don't care what my hit roll is, because if I roll 5s and 6s, you die.
Yep.
That doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Wish we were a little colder. The strawberry one's good, though.
Yeah, they warmed up a little bit.
Warmed up quick. It's humid and warm now. We're getting that time of year. Shifting gears a touch, even though we haven't talked about it much lately, we did learn of a massive update to 40K coming.
Yes. So we saw a Meta Watch, was it just today?
Just today.
Where they were talking about fixing so many of the things that I know you and I have been asking for them to fix. Things like, are you a vehicle? You can shoot in combat, so why don't you just do an action while you're locked in combat?
Yeah.
You can't. You're not gonna be able to do that anymore.
Nope.
Having pistols and run and like being locked in combat doesn't allow you to do actions anymore.
Right.
Battle shocked units, you can't do actions.
If you are a 0
OC unit,
unit
which is
no longer
huge, right? Like every single Chaos player allied in Nurglings, just so they can do actions because they were so cheap.
Even Tyranid players with Rippers,
Ripper swarms,
0 CP.
absolutely.
Go in that building, perform an action.
Yeah. So I'm glad they got rid of that because before that was like, well, if you're 0 OC, you can't go capture an objective. But if you have another unit nearby that captures an objective and holds the objective while your 0 OC unit performs an action, it works. Yeah. Not anymore. So a lot of it was around that action economy and performing actions. They fixed a lot of
which was new, and they learned from it.
Yeah.
And they also want every season to feel almost like a new edition of the game.
Yeah.
And one of the things they said was coming with this update, unlike previous where it was just rules updates, points update, mission update. Well, they're doing all of it, and it sounds like they're doing considerable stuff. They again reiterated what they're doing for AdMech.
Yeah.
They said they're going to do another points pass, even though they said normally that would be mid-summer. They said, nope, we're going to just do it right now when we got new missions.
Good. And that's another thing, is the mission pack.
Yeah.
All new rules, all new scenarios, all new objective
They
pack.
specifically talked about how diagonal deployment is so awkward to measure, because you have to do this measurement from corners and then cut a weird thing through terrain. And then they said they kept one because it was voted as some fan favorite. I don't know where they got the data.
Who voted? What
it has
what
to be
poll?
when, it has to be when they're walking around just doing their thing at tournaments.
I never saw any poll.
But the rest of them, they've changed them to more geometric shapes.
Okay.
Square and step type deployments. And they wanted to reward battle line units. So more of it's going to be centered around that. They're not doing attacks in the list building. They're not saying you have to take X battle line and X HQ. But they're just saying, like, well, if you want to max score in this mission, you're pretty much going to have battle line. And you're going to have to use battle line to go perform actions instead of 0 OC, which is objective control is the term we're talking about. All of those right away were like, oh, that's great.
The other thing I worry about is because most battle line units are very squishy.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of lethality in the game.
High lethality at range.
Even with units that like ignore line of sight and things like that. I'm worried that the name of the game going forward is going to be eliminate your opponent's battle line units first, and then they can't score max anymore. You know what I mean? Like take
concurrently. Think of what that changes though in terms of the weapon selections people are, because right now we've talked about how everybody gravitated in this season of 10th, this first quarter of 10th edition, into you took the weapon that had the highest AP, the highest damage, and you kind of didn't take anything else. You wanted to kill their big stuff and then try to score with 0 OC units. Well, now you can't do the latter, and if you're taking the former, that's wasted on battle line. So now we're going to see all these weapons that we didn't think fit anywhere.
There's a ton of weapons in the game that are strength 8,
Yep.
high number of shots, low AP but high damage that are good for just killing battle line units anyway. They have blast, so make extra shots when shooting at battle line units, that kind of thing. And I think what we might see is, this is what I'm worried about.
I think this will actually make Tau better, by the way, but
I'm worried about it. I don't know. So I can see it going one of two ways. Scenario 1, it's a more balanced list for everybody. Scenario number 2 is you play the exact same list you used to play, who was already good at killing like infantry units, and you just don't bring any battle line yourself. You overload your army with just good stuff.
You're hoping to erase battle line.
And then you outnumber or you outperform them without battle line units because you eliminate their battle line units, and then they're under points compared to you. You know what I mean? That basically like their battle line is a tax they're paying that puts them at a disadvantage. Because you're not including any battle line, you kill all of theirs, now you're on the same ground, except they're missing 400 points, or 500 points. You know what I mean?
But I don't know if we have an example of that happening yet. And the reason I say that is because none of the Orcs lists that appeared at either the US Open or the recent GT, whatever that one is, Bug Eater. The Orcs list, for example, they were still on Bully Boys and not on Green Tide.
Right.
The Tyranid list, only one played the Gaunts Heavy list, and it won the US Open, did not appear at Bug Eater. And I don't think it's because it's not good. It's because when people are bringing the high strength, high damage output, it is not enough shots to deal with those armies. And so you can't eliminate their battle line and hope to win that way. And then,
so I think there'll be some list tweaking, but you often give up weapon options on your big heavy stuff because it doesn't have enough. It has too many shots that are low strength. So I think you're still going to play the big heavy stuff, but you're just going to change which weapons they bring now. You're going to add more flamers. You're going to add more like indirect fire. You're going to add more auto cannons that are strength 7 -1, 2, stuff like that. But you're still going to I think there's still a list building philosophy that can reward you by only bringing like the bigger heavy stuff. You know what I mean? You just choose different guns this time around.
And depending on how the scoring is going to go, though, I don't think there's anyone who's going to be able to turn 1 alpha all the battle line out. And those battle line that the opponent has that you didn't bring might be scoring max and you can't.
Yeah. And while you might be willingly sacrificing 20 maximum points by not bringing battle line and denying your opponent those 20 maximum points by killing all of their battle line, that definitely does hurt you when you're trying to determine strength of schedule, overall battle points, when you're trying to determine tiebreakers, that kind of stuff. You're hurting yourself by not doing it. So you're right. It might be might be just better off just scoring maximum 100 points with battle line included in your army.
Because we know there are people who are savvy and can score quick. Yeah. We have an example of a Rolling Sixes player, which is a team for those wondering.
Yeah. That's our Southeast Iowa tabletop team.
Yep. And one of the players is exceptional, and he goes to the opens and he goes to those.
He was invited to be on the World's team for the US.
Exactly. And we watched in games where he got tabled or nearly tabled, but he was so good in scoring those first 3 turns that the other guy just had to play catch up, even though his opponent had no models.
Well, because a lot of objectives it revolve around you killing your opponent's stuff on the turn you draw the objective.
Right.
And it's well, shit, I can't get my secondaries because I've already tabled you.
Yep.
How am I going to bring it down, or how am I going to eliminate your characters? I've already killed them all.
And so
it's well, sorry.
Well, now you can see armies that have, say, faster battle line. You might see, let's say, a Tyranid player. Instead of going with that Gaunt heavy list, they might all of a sudden be or just the 2 units of gargoyles. Well, now you got to play a bunch, or now you got to consider Hummergaunts.
Yeah, they're flat move 8 to begin with.
They're super fast.
Yeah.
They cost nothing, and you might see Orcs shift a little more. Now, that's a lot of models, and so people will take that in consideration. Efficiency is a part of tournament play.
Yeah.
But so far, these changes they've shown us suggest big changes in the meta, on top of the fact that we have 4 codexes now that have hardly even been broken in.
Yeah. So at least it's going to be they're trying to change the meta. Yeah. Right? That's the idea. If it actually is enough to change it, we don't know yet.
Well, and it might not change right away because you will have people who just try their existing army in the new front
and it might
for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And so they won't have to, or they won't right away. And so you can get a skew result somewhere. Mm-hmm. It'll be like Nova when we get a tell, really, which can you believe how fast this year is going? We're halfway through 2024.
It's June already. What the heck?
What happened?
I don't know.
Every time a New Year starts, yay, and then it's over. But big changes, and they said points changes coming again.
Okay.
The AdMech stuff coming again. One of the side notes that was interesting was the secret missions.
Which I love, by the way.
Which they're
having information that's hidden from your opponent that you work around and try to, because when you've got static objectives or you draw cards for what you want to do, your opponent can play around and deny you and change their own game plan to prevent you from doing a thing. If it's like, oh, you drew assassinate, well, I'm going to back up all my characters and hide them so you can't get assassinate. So either you need to sacrifice the card this turn or hold on to it for an extra turn and waste drawing another one to try to get it later. And it's like a savvy player will do that kind of thing. Yep. But with a hidden objective where you don't know what your opponent's trying to accomplish, they might bluff you into thinking that they're trying to do something else and then spring a trap and accomplish their second, they're hidden.
And it's not wasted in addition to your primary.
Right.
And so you can just hang on to that. In the event you fall behind in an area that you know you might fall behind in because of the way your list is built or because of the way a matchup goes. And then decide like, well, I got this one that says if my warlord is in your deployment zone on an objective in the last turn or whatever, I score X amount of points. Right. Now, your opponent will still be able to see that that's what you're doing. Why is your guy just beelining for my... And they can counterplay it. But I think that's a more elegant...
But you might trick them into thinking that's what you're doing.
Yep.
If you start running your warlord at your opponent's deployment zone, they might think, oh, well, they've got which your secret...
I'm ahead by
10. Which used to be called their strategic ploy, which lets you sacrifice your primary to accomplish
the
this.
Gambit.
The Gambit, right. That's what it was, the Gambit. Yeah. The Gambit it never really took off. No one used it. Not a single time did anyone ever use a Gambit.
And they knew that.
They were so hard.
Yeah.
They were so hard to pull off, and yes, they were a lot of points, but you couldn't bank on a Gambit. You couldn't even gamble on a Gambit.
And that designer who was sitting there in the interview today even said that. It was just like, some of them were so hard to pull off.
Because if it was like guaranteed where it's like, well, I split my units up and I took all 4 corners, I guarantee you get 30 points because I accomplished that, then be like, okay, yeah, you're right, that's a good one. But now it was like, oh, if you control all 4 corners of the map at the end of the game, roll 2 dice. On an 11, you get 30 points, and you get +1 to that roll for every one you control beyond 1. Yeah. So you're like, okay, I need 11 plus 3. I need to roll an 8 on 2d6. I'm not banking on that. No. That's horrible. That's a horrible chance.
Plus you have to have 4 corners.
Yeah, and then that's already a feat.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you're behind, that made it even less. And so these feel more like a just in case. You can sit on them.
Yeah.
And if you fall behind, you can go for a thing. And there's not only play, there's counterplay, and there's bluffing.
Yeah.
All of those are in there now.
Which is great.
And it costs you nothing to do it.
I love it. It's so good. Yeah. It's such a better scoring mechanic. It's so much better. Better design, better thought behind it, a better execution. Yeah.
It showed that they studied how the gambits went or didn't go. and I think that's real smart. Immediately I know the predominantly 40K players in our group were excited.
Yeah.
So
because it fixed a lot of the pressure points of the game that caused unfun gameplay experiences.
Yep.
Right? And that's what rubs people the wrong way. That's what makes people stop liking a game is when they have an experience that is poor and it makes them not want to play the game because it doesn't feel worth it. Right, like we can have a whole episode on just talking about that.
Yeah,
right? About power gamers and negative play experiences and metagaming and all of that. That's a whole other topic entirely. Yeah. And some people can't help themselves. They have to try. They have to net list, which is another term that you might have heard, where basically you don't come up with something yourself. You crowdsource a list, or you take a list from the internet where someone has posted a list that this is the winning list from X tournament, got first place. You take that list, build your own army that way, and you just play it. Net listing. You put no thought into your army. You let someone else play test the list.
You might not have even learned what makes it tick.
Right. So a lot of net lists actually perform badly.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they do beat casual opponents because of the optimal unit choices, the efficiency of the list. That it's like it's hard for you to lose, even if you don't really know the nuances of what you're doing. And so all of that can all be kind of grouped into same kind of thing.
I don't even know if we could do that in one episode because you'd also have to go into the fact that sometimes the bad experience was because of their own mistake or they didn't understand a rule an opponent had and they got
even the opponent misunderstood a rule and has been playing it wrong.
Yeah.
And told you this is how it is and they were wrong and it created a negative play experience for you because there's nothing you could do about whatever happened.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you think, okay, well this game is wildly out of balance because this thing keeps happening all the time. that I have no control over and I can't stop it from happening because someone is doing something incorrectly.
And
that feels horrible too.
And so they draw the wrong conclusion. I have no counterplay to it. There's no. It's
why even bother
they need
playing?
to fix it. This happened to me once, so I think it's the most broken thing ever. And you're right. So it can be any number of things. So that would be hard to pin down in one episode.
Yeah.
By topic, you could probably do a week or a month. But
we could get it done in a few episodes, I think.
Yeah. The legit,
I could do a TED talk on it.
But the legit bad experience moments are pressure points in a game. And some of those simple ones were addressed. I mean, the zero OC guy scoring or performing an action. Nobody needing to take battle line for any reason.
Yep.
And then
because battle line literally had no purpose.
No.
They really didn't. Anything else could do it better than the battle line.
Because unless they were outrageously efficient, they just weren't taken because they're the weakest, they kill the least, and you didn't need them to score.
Yeah.
Now we'll see once we get
perhaps you might
once we get the full picture of the new update, what that'll look like. But that's good. Things happen in that game too, because that edition is still relatively young. But
I think the one of the more interesting takeaways is that they are listening to community feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I mean they've been doing that for a while, and this just shows again that they're doing that.
They said what's also coming with this one that we haven't seen in a while is a very comprehensive FAQ. And for people who aren't familiar with, I mean the term's in every genre, but they used to do FAQs once in a blue moon, and they would be supposedly these rules questions that nobody understood. But lately, as they've been doing balanced data slates and points adjustments in both games, we didn't see as many of just the questions answered.
Right.
The questions where people didn't understand how an interaction worked, even though maybe some of us could just read the rule and be like, oh, no, I totally get how it works. There are still ones where people sit there and say, some people are just stubborn and will say, well, until they say, I'm just going to assume this is blank. Well, they said, we were asked a bunch of questions, so we're going to release a huge FAQ that answers those questions.
Which is great, because a lot of the times it's clarifying what the rules writers intended.
Yep.
Maybe if the actual written words didn't explain it correctly, and it creates some ambiguity.
Yep.
The FAQs and the erratas that come with them to change the wording to make it clearer, because they're usually brought together, will clarify. With this situation, this is what we intended the rule, the way we wrote it, to be interpreted. And if it wasn't, we'll change that so that it's more clear. But this is what we wanted to happen.
And it ends up, no matter what debate or discussion follows, it ends up so much better for the game for them to just say, this is what it does.
Right. Because
it's better to know what it's supposed to do than to juggle and you're hoping for one but get the other.
Well, because sometimes it's also something where again, the communities are misunderstanding it, and they gripe about it because it's like, well, this whole aspect of the game sucks.
And then a TO has to rule on it and they don't like it.
Exactly. But the rules writers sometimes come back and say, well, that's not how we meant it to go at all. Like, we'll fix it and reword it so it's how it works, how we want it to. And people read that and they're like, oh, well, that's way better. Yep. And it's like, yeah, that's how it was supposed to be played. But sorry if that didn't come across, but that's how it was meant to be, not how everyone was interpreting it.
And when we used to get FAQs, you didn't know. It was on the Games Workshop site. It wouldn't be an article, whatever, because that was their store.
They didn't have a community site. Yeah. There was nowhere for them to communicate that an update or a patch, if you will, was actually released to clarify things. It's like you had to notice it, or you had to go to a third-party message board and have them spread the information around. Yeah. There wasn't a download section. There was like, you'd go to the web store, and there would be, like, you have to go to the unit, and then it would be like a thing where there was a PDF attached to the description of the unit that would clarify.
There were tabs that would say package contents, downloads.
Yeah, and it was crazy. It was an awful way to do it. Yeah. Having it on the web store was not the way. The Warhammer community site is probably the best decision, and if they're listening, it's the best decision they made.
Yes. To
help their business and their community thrive.
Because now you've got an official page that isn't even their store. Yep. Now, their store site, which sucks to operate around.
It's only mostly on a phone.
Yes, on mobile.
The desktop is still fine.
Yeah. The fact that they have a site now that is apart from their store, that is just content and rules, is great. Because they do put that stuff up there fast.
Yeah. And the turnaround for that kind of thing is very quick now. Yeah. You don't have to wait 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. Now it's like, okay, wait 6 weeks and we'll have an update for you to fix things.
Yep.
Great. That's way better than what it had been for decades.
And
prior to maybe like 5 years ago.
Well, and since the advent of the community site and their more direct involvement with the players, they've gotten better actually at rules writing. And what I mean by that is now when a new set of rules comes out for an army or a season, there's not as much need for a massive FAQ when it comes out. Now, a new, let's say, codex drops for 40K or battle tome drops for AOS. Now you'll get the FAQ or the points or whatever within 2 weeks, but it's much less, needs to be clarified. I think it's also helping them write better to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still think they could declunk, a new word, some of their army rules. Yep. Here's an example that I had thought of that I think
I've got one too,
would be something that, like, this is overly engineered, overly complicated sort of ability, right? So like the Tau Codex has very complicated rules for how a main part of their army works, and that is the spotting system. Mm-hmm. The spotting system is so complicated. Like it creates a lot of issues because vehicles in combat using the big guns never tire rule can spot to a unit outside of their combat for another unit that's not in combat shooting at them. It's like it's just bizarre. That's like, how is that logic work? You know, like using these rules in this specific line of logic, this can happen, right? The whole spotting system is nebulous and bizarre, right? You select a unit that hasn't shot yet. It can target for another unit that hasn't shot yet, provided that both units can see the same target.
That's already so many hoops.
And then the spotter can then shoot at a different target if they want to, but they themselves cannot be spotted for. It's just like, boo, that is so complicated, right? If it were something like, hey, a unit with a marker light, for every unit you have in your army with a marker light, choose a unit that's visible to them to receive a marker light token.
Yeah.
When a unit that isn't that, a marker light unit targets them, or a unit that didn't provide that marker light token targets them, they can expend the marker light token to get this benefit. Like, it's so much more simple. And it would happen in like the command phase or something, or at the end of the movement phase, whatever. But it's like, why are you doing these hoops to try to like coordinate this rule? And it's just like, just do this instead.
Well, it's funny is it's like when they try to describe terrain and cover rules in 40K a lot of times, where they think adding more words clarifies it. And you and I have talked, as an aside, that Games Workshop would benefit from doing what some other game systems do, and that's like having markers and tokens on the field.
Right.
And that actually cuts down.
But in a limited capacity.
Limited.
I'll tell you what, there was some big news from a company that utilized many, many tokens, and that is P3? War Machine?
Privateer, War Machine.
That game used too many markers. There was too many stuff.
There were 10 times as many markers as models,
and it was absurd because there was like smoke markers, and there was like rings that determined auras and stuff. There was too many things. You ended up looking like someone took like a kid's hobby kit and just like chucked it on a board with how many rings and hoops and like little colorful tokens that were all on a board. It was just a mess. It's like, how does anyone keep track of what's going on here?
Yep.
However, status tokens,
basic status tokens,
and like exhaustion tokens for when a unit has done its thing. Yep. I think the game could definitely benefit from it, even especially if they made official tokens for it.
Yep.
That they would sell, even to determine this kind of thing.
And if they're listening, they could make two kinds. You could have the inexpensive punch card versions that are that thick card, and then you could make collector's versions that are metal or whatever.
Sure, why not?
But
make it a normalized thing.
A normalized thing.
Right? So we're used to it. So it's like, oh, you went with a unit. Let's not forget you went with that unit. Mark a thing on it.
And that is better.
This unit's battle shocked. Put a thing next to it.
It's better. It's cleaner than doing what people have done for 30 years, which is you just put a dice by something.
Or just remember.
Yeah. And think about for the fact that they stream their games now on Warhammer TV, on
How
Twitch.
Nice would it be if you can view the game from above and you see all the status tokens.
And there's this little fatigue token. There's this little charged status token. There's this little marker light token. That I think would be great. And we see them do it sometimes, but not enough.
Yeah.
But in addition to what you said about when they still sometimes overcomplicate a rule to do a very simple effect, we've seen some of it, whereas the first rules they were showing us in AOS 4, and I still think their rules writing is some of the best they've done.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't changed. But we have seen now some instances where they take 3 paragraphs to basically say, this thing does mortal damage.
Right.
And it's like, look at all these things you had to go through to get to the spot where you just see you roll a dice for mortal damage.
Right.
And that I think they could.
Yeah. Special keyword, right? Universal keyword, impact hits.
Yeah. Just put that on the war scroll.
Say impact hits D3.
Yeah.
What that means from the core rules is roll a D3 when they charge. On a 2+, they deal
that much damage. Yeah.
Impact hits D6 when they charge. Roll a dice. On a 2+, they deal that much damage. Impact hits D3+1.
Right.
On a 3+ or 2+, they deal this much more.
Yeah.
Like they could have simplified it. We saw it for the storm vermin, the storm fiends, where they had shock gauntlets that had exploding hits. Where if you rolled a critical hit, you got extra hits. Right. They already had a universal rule written in the core book that says multiple hits or whatever it's called, sustained hits 1 for you 40K fans. Where it's basically, if you roll a critical hit of 6, or whatever their critical is, some things have their range of critical expanded, you get 2 hits, right? It says that, critical hit 2, or whatever. But they could have just made the rule critical hits X, and then put any number in those brackets. Right? Critical hits 3, critical hits 5, critical hits D6. If you roll a critical hit, you get D6 hits instead of 1. They could have done that, but they said, nope. There's only one kind of critical hits, whatever it's called, and it's called 2. And if you have anything other than that, we're going to write paragraphs below to define exactly what that rule does with a different number.
Yeah.
It's like, that was unnecessary. You didn't need to do that.
I think while they did better with AOS that we've seen than they did with 40K as far as the keywords or the USRs, they still could shrink so much more down to that. I mean, the impact hits one is a great one that they could have used. Yeah. And they still are trying so hard to define the unit by their fluff, by their army, by their whatever. And so they give it a unique name and then a little paragraph of fluff, and then here's what it does in 2 paragraphs. Yeah. And instead, it could just be for any unit, any army, impact hits this, on fire this, or whatever. Like, and that's what a lot of games with tighter rules do. Now, these rules still are going to play, I think, tight, because they're still defining them well. But they could have still simplified it even farther. Those unit cards could shrink even more. Yeah. Like
without losing like the effect of the ability, without losing the flavor of it. A shock gauntlet like electrocutes everybody when it hits them with a critical hit.
And it would be shocking to people who've played Games Workshop games for so long and are used to seeing all that flavor text in the card. Yes. Yeah. But for game cleanliness and ease, especially of getting new people into it or of remembering when you're sitting there in the game. Just give it all the same keyword because it does the same thing. And they've done it with some stuff, but not enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Still,
the room for potential.
Most exciting with AOS 4.
For expansion and cleanliness and change to make it even better.
So even though they showed you a little bit of Stormcast Eternals and Skaven already, what else are you looking forward to seeing most of the faction previews remaining?
I want to see Chaos, man.
Slaves
of Darkness has been my baby for a while now.
Both of us.
And I really, really want to see more. I want to see what Archaon does. Mm-hmm. I want to see what Bellicor does. Hopefully he gets Glow Up. I want to see what some of the new stuff does in the new rules. I want to see how they improve Abraxia from 3 to 4.
You make a sexy new centerpiece model. My lady love.
You're insane if you tell me that she's got the same save as like a naked ogre with a shield. It's like, come on. Like, she should not have a 4+ save.
In fact, when I saw that...
A Blight King has a 3-up save,
I was going to say, when I saw them and the Harbinger sitting there with like their 3s, it's like, she's got to have a 3. She's got
to. Chaos Warriors, Chaos Knights, Chosen, the Varanguard, and her, they're all going to have 3-up saves. They have to.
They have to.
I think
they have some of the heaviest looking armor in the game.
I think the 4-up save that they gave her in 3.0 was a gaffe. I think they did it because they didn't want her to take over at the end of the edition.
The last bits of 3, yeah.
I don't think that maybe they didn't want to even like spoil her real rules because they didn't. Her fluff abilities that she should have are non-existent on her War Scroll. Her spear mutates. Her spear is special, right? I'm nerding out here a little bit.
Yeah.
But the lore behind her spear is specifically that it is a change staff, is what it is, right? You get stabbed with it, you hold on to it, you have the potential to be turned into a mutated beast. Her being able to wield it is a testament to her abilities and her strength.
And Arcane gave it to her for that reason.
As a test.
Yeah.
And so when she failed the first time, she grew horns. Mm-hmm. But that's the extent of it. From then, she's had control. But the whole point of the spear is that you hit other people with it, and not only does it kill them, but it has the potential to, like, mutate them into something else, too. And it does, like, almost nothing of that.
No.
The only version of that type of lore-based rule that she has is a chance on a 6 to gain a special ability when she hits on a 6 to deal some bonus damage.
6 into 6.
It's just not the kind of rule that they're known for, especially with a cool character like that. Like, Archeon's got an ability with his sword, the Slayer of Kings, that if he attacks a hero and you roll 2 6s to wound, they die.
Just instant.
They're dead. You get no save, you get no wards, you don't get a test. You are dead if he rolls 2 6s to wound.
Yep.
You're done. You're dead.
And for that reason, you pay an exorbitant cost for him.
You do. She should have an ability similar to that, where she turns him into a spawn. Chaos spawn in some way, or does something more than just extra wounds.
Yeah,
extra damage.
We said this the last couple of weeks that I feel like hers and even some of the Dark Oaths rules were just throwaway. Like, okay, you're gonna have them for a month. Here you go.
Yeah.
I expect them to look different, but you're right. Okay, so Slaves to Darkness, I'm obviously looking forward to the most.
Big time.
Other ones that Cities of Sigmar, did they show us?
They have not.
And so I bring them up
Have
because...
Have they not? I don't remember.
Regardless of... I don't think they did.
I don't think they did either.
Do we...
No, wait. They talked about them.
Do we piss people out and say irregardless?
Hang on. Let me think a minute. They might have.
Maybe they did.
I think maybe they did.
Maybe they did.
Because we saw we saw that they had abilities that affected cross race. There was an article about them.
But did we see rules for, like...
Maybe I saw a leak.
A character.
I don't remember anymore.
So,
I don't remember. I've seen so many things. I can't tell if they're official or not.
Egg on the face.
Yeah.
I have decided that I might participate in Spearhead because
them?
And I might choose them because the cool thing about that is, like, the cost of getting into a new army is so expensive, but cost of getting into Spearhead is 1 box and 1 box only.
Yeah.
And that's assuming you don't already own models for that faction. And I personally think Cities of Sigmar, from an aesthetic and sculpting perspective, is one of the best looking armies of tabletop gaming.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
I really do.
Okay.
Now, and that's with me loving the new Dark Oath.
Yeah.
I think the Cities of Sigmar, the whole new range of minis they got, it's like some of the best looking humans. Everything from the fact that some of them just look like peasants, some of them look like soldiers, but all their scale is correct. And then the freedom you have with just like a wooden shield with a blank diamond on it that they didn't sculpt the insignias on, that they left to you to use a decal or freehand to make them look however you want. And their clothing and their armor is so simple that you can do the same thing. Metal plus color. And I think that is just like the pinnacle of army.
A hobbyist stream.
A hobbyist stream who also plays.
Sure.
And so for Spearhead, I might do that because I actually think Spearhead itself might be a really fun tournament format where you don't have to worry about building the best 2,000 points.
Right.
You can, like, I'm going to play the Spearhead at this event.
I'll pilot it without making any decisions.
Because 3 rounds is over in like 2 hours. Yeah. Like,
Okay, I like that.
And so, and I might try my hand at it at Gen Con at Indianapolis because Games Workshop is going to be running a bunch of Spearhead flights. And you pay $2, I think it is.
You just play.
And you show up, and I think they have the Spearheads there, and you play.
Okay.
And there's regular games, and then there's also a King of the Hill style where you and a teammate survive as long as you can against waves of enemies with a spearhead.
Oh, I love that.
So, because you played that with Rhino.
I love PvE games,
yeah.
Especially in tabletop. I really do. PvP gets monotonous to me. It ends up being... who can outbuy each other in terms of expensive, really good models in the game, and it devolves into like a pissing match. That's how PvP games go, in my opinion. Unless you rein it in, you've got some restrictions that you impose on yourselves. It's just who can buy the best models,
who's willing to play that army.
Right. Yeah,
and now on the hobby side, our whole group has participated.
I still need to post the photos of my squig. I know you're getting to that. I'm going to jump the gun. I say, I know. I need to post mine.
Well, and so we're not the pioneers. We saw that woman whose name I forget who showed off the color cube, and it took the internet by storm really quick. Really neat.
It took the internet by storm. Color cube.
Color cube. Yeah. Yeah. Color cube. And so Moose, our store owner, ordered the color cube. Color cube.
Sorry.
He ordered the color cube and a premium box, and you get inside, for those who don't know, you get 2 volumes, each with 250 cards.
Yeah.
And so what we did is we flip a coin for volume 1, volume 2, and then we used a randomizer to decide which card we get.
Yep.
And 4 members of our group, you, me, Rhino, and Tara.
Moose.
Oh, yeah. Moose, not Rhino. You, me, Moose, and Tara.
Yep.
Terradice with a P, for those wondering online.
A pterodactyl.
Yep, and we all did it at random. Each took our card. We were each given a squig hopper.
Yep.
And we were like, we're going to take this swatch, this card, and we're only going to use those colors with black and white and paint a squig.
You can darken or lighten these colors.
Yep.
These 5 that you're given.
You can mix them.
But you have to use these 5 paints.
Yeah.
Basically. We find a paint that matches the color on the swatch. That's what you have access to, plus black and white. Paint an entire model using this color scheme.
Yeah, and I know we saw Ninjon do it, and it was a really clever idea.
Yep.
Got to give credit where credit's due, and they're all based on color theory in some way, and so that was something I know we all wanted to up our game in, is understanding instead of just looking at a part, knowing what colors we like, and then deciding we're just going to use them.
Because I'm guilty of that all the time. It's just like I get a model, I'm like, all right, well I know how to do this color scheme. Yeah. I'm just going to do this one.
Right, or even if you don't have a scheme in mind, you're like, well, I know I really like this for leather, I like this for capes, I like this for swords, I like that. And so you just kind of default to the same stuff. We all do it.
Yeah.
And so when I saw he did that, and this was like a palate cleanser for him, he won his first golden demon at the last one at Adepticon.
Was it a gold?
No, he got a bronze, in the AOS unit.
That's right.
For his Sigmar guys, or his cities of Sigmar guys. And he, but as a palate cleanser, he's like, well, I'm going to do this where I trust the randomizer and pick a color scheme, and I'm going to use that on a model.
Right.
We decided we're going to do that. We all did it. And then our distant honorary First Turn Games member, Dracoya, is taking part in it as well. And so 5 of us total. And some of us are done already. Some are still working on it. But I thought it was so much fun. Mine ended up a really monochromatic palette, but that was okay.
We had a few of those.
Yeah.
Yours was really monochromatic. I know Moose's was really monochromatic. It was just in the browns.
Yeah.
Yours was in like the fleshy.
Mine was like 3 pumpkin oranges and 2 blacks. Yeah. Is what mine was. It was saltwater taffy through and through. And but it ended up like fun to figure out what I could do with them, because you can mix the colors you have so long as you're using those paints and get some variation in tone. And so mine, I had to go for a little bit of a moodier, darker, whereas like Tara drew basically the 3 primaries and then like a light purple and a darker thing, and then you had some very nice orc colors.
So it was so funny. Mine was hilarious because it was the colors you would want if you were painting a squig ridden by a night goblin.
In classic colors.
These are the colors that you want. But it's like, that's no fun. I could just paint a classic box art night goblin.
And so you made a decision.
I did.
To switch some things up.
Yeah. So I still liked the idea of doing the green goblin.
Yeah.
But I used as my undercoat color, I used red.
Mm-hmm.
So like my shadow color is red for my green, which is something I've learned and I've done before.
Yeah.
I really like red under green because
it's a nice contrast.
It gives that nice warm like there's blood underneath the skin kind of feel to it. I went with red on my clothing instead of black like a night goblin should have, and then I used my sort of I don't know, dirty linen, sort of brown white that I had on the skin of the squig instead. Mm-hmm. So my squig is red underbelly plus this kind of dirty off-white kind of color. I used Storm Vermin Fur was the one that matched for me.
Yeah.
And so I have a very like stone, kind of like slate stone kind of color palette for my squig, and it turned out really good, better than I thought it would have.
Yeah.
Plus I had yellow, which again would have been great for Night Goblins if I did like Moon
Clan,
or the Moon Clan, right? Or like the lightning bolts of yellow that they usually have. But I use yellow as like a mixer color to lighten up my colors. I use like yellow as an accent color. I used it for like the eyes of the squig because my squig was very arachnic, right? It was like arachnid. It was kind of spidery, so I had yellow eyes. I used the yellow in the teeth and then the claws, and it's like a subtle background color for my yellow. But I used all my colors, and I think it turned out phenomenally.
And and so that was another way to challenge yourself instead of just saying, "Ha, I got traditional Codex Goblin colors. I'm going to do that." You instead were like, "Well, wait. How can I take these colors and do something else?"
Yeah.
The challenge I faced with mine, being as monochromatic as it was, is it didn't have any light colors and it didn't have any contrasting colors. Mm-hmm. So when I wanted to do some spots on my squig or an underbelly on the squig, I didn't have a contrast to any of those orangey browns to make it jump. So I had to come up with something else. Thankfully, one of the colors was like a mahogany that when you add either the lighter orange or when you add a white to it, you can get some pinkish elements out of it. And so I was able to push it in a slightly different direction. Now for the Goblin, I just went with kind of an orangey thing, which I was already trying on whatever those homeboys are and the Cruel Boys.
You did it on Hobgrot.
Hobgrot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was able to kind of lean in that direction.
You also had a Forge Orc from Creature Caster that was similar for one of a paint competitions you did, where it was kind of an orangish, warm but not fleshy sort of color.
And so this one I just toned back from that into the fleshier. And anyway, the whole point of this was like, what a great literal palette cleanser and a great way to understand your colors better. Yep. I might continue to do this just because there's 500 cards in the set, and that's a great way to, I think, mix it up in between whatever else you're working on, or even if you're stuck,
or even if you know that you can do this, you can choose 5 colors and mix them and match them and blend them and create more interesting colors out of them. You can avoid using all your other paints and just stick to 5 colors, even for like an army's color scheme.
Well, and that's a big one, is there are people who, through whether they're doing army or a display piece or whatever, they sometimes simply don't write down what they did, and then they get back to it and they don't remember how to get there. Well, it's like, well, if you're sticking to 5 to 7 total paints and just learning to mix, you can't really mess up.
I will say I noticed that exact thing, I think, is what happened for an award-winning piece that we had from Golden Demon last year at Adepticon. It was a Space Marine unit. It might have been like the company...
The Ultramarines?
The company command one, where they had, across the 5 different models, they had like Banner Bearer and like, company champion and stuff like that. But you'll notice that halfway through where they painted, they switched colors of like formulas for their NMM gold. Mm-hmm. Like their gold changed warmth, so that the warmth quality in it.
Yeah.
And even on the same model, maybe they ran out of one of their paints they were using, or they forgot which paint they were using. They switched to a different one. But it goes from sort of like your classic yellowy gold to more of a pinkish gold.
Yeah.
Halfway through one of the models, and the other 2 models also had the pinkish gold.
Yeah.
And it wasn't rhyme or reason. It wasn't like this right side of it was the pinky gold and this left side was the gold. It was like,
and there was no secondary light source on the model, no OSL.
It just switched, and I think that was a classic case of whoops. I forgot which color I was using, and I took
switched. 3 months away from this project, forgot which colors I was using, or switched the paints I was using, and these little color cards I think are a great way to stay in house. Our buddy Moose, he had kind of monochromatic, but they were like beach tones, like
lots of tans and yellows,
but they like leaned pastel, and so he did a really great thing where with his squig he went almost albino, and then he gave it the punch, which doesn't show up that well in a phone photograph, unfortunately, because it looks so good in person. And then the lip, he put all this action in, all this visual information in the bottom lip of that squig, and he gave it a cyclopean slit eye, which was really neat touch. And then Tara, got pretty creative with hers in that it was colors she doesn't use because her jam is the turquoise, teals, and magentas.
Yep.
And her card had none of that.
It had 3 primary colors on it. It had classic red, classic yellow, classic blue.
Yeah.
And so she had to do a challenge where she had to mix her own colors to find creative combinations.
And so she thankfully did, because I think what would be easy is if you took those colors and you just started blocking in detail blue, blocking in detail yellow, blocking in detail red. And she instead mixed it and got a really cool green for her squig, which was nice. And so I think the key to that, I don't think you have to always push yourself out of your comfort zone. But when you do it like this, it does teach you something about your paints. It does teach you something about color theory. And then pick a small model with very expressive details. And it's kind of open and nothing's too tucked away. And so those squig hoppers were perfect for that. A chibi, I think, is perfect for that sort of challenge. A single infantry.
Maybe a bust.
Yeah,
could be
a bust
the
where
right
it's
size
open.
to work with that kind of color. Yeah.
And that is a great thing to do, I think, every so often. Yeah. And doing it as a group motivated us and gave us all palette cleansers from what
because we got it done so fast, all of us.
Yeah.
We're normally, like, if I was working on something, I would work on it for a little bit and then switch to something else, potentially, right? And then come back to it later, then switch to something else. And maybe never come back to it again, not finish it.
Right.
This, I finished it, like, straight away.
Yeah.
It got me motivated to complete it because I was falling behind. I needed to complete it with everyone else.
Yeah, and
so that was nice.
I think it was in total, it was like 2 sessions and everyone was done. And
5-6 hours total.
And it's going into a unit for Tara's army because she's getting ready for
Which
AOS4.
it's not going to go to waste. She's going to use the painted models in her army.
And we were coming up with names for them and all that. But anyway, check all our Instagrams out and you can see our progress on them or see the completed figures. And Dracoya will hopefully get to. She's not doing a squig. I think she's just printing something and then doing it. Yeah, I was like, I shouldn't have let you pick the model. Is what I said to her. Yeah. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what she does. But no, great color challenge is what it's been called. Yeah, and I know it's like a trend, and we normally don't jump into the trends, but this was a really healthy one, I think.
Would recommend if you're a hobbyist and you like painting. Try it out.
Or hit us up and we will draw the card randomly for you.
If you want a color swatch to have to challenge yourself with, we will send you one.
Yep, we'll send you one. No problem. If you don't want to buy
we're not going to mail it to you.
No.
We'll send you a photo of what colors you need to use.
And I'll send you both. I'll send you the picture of the colors and then I'll send you the names of them so you can see if the color isn't true in the camera photo.
For sure.
But if you don't want to buy the color cube, I understand, but we will definitely draw one for you.
Yep.
And then you can go with it.
Yeah, take a bite out of that.
Yep.
Speaking of which...
I could eat some colors.
I think I need to say one more thing. We touched on it a bit earlier, but Privateer Press was purchased, by the way.
By Steamforge.
By Steamforge, who made Guild Ball. And
God Tier.
So if that inspires dread within you, I can understand. Mm-hmm. If it makes you hopeful about P3's future, maybe they got some more resource injection, and maybe they'll be... given some new rules.
Because as far as I understand, Steamforge mostly is a Kickstarter company.
Correct.
So
whatever that means for the P3,
right?
I have no idea.
Especially with War Machine having a brand new edition.
Yep. So we'll throw that out there just because that it was a big piece of news, not Warhammer related.
It was.
Something to look at and something to watch.
Because you and I have even said, well, I've never been a War Machine guy.
Some of their new models look great.
Some of their new models are in plastic and they're proportion correct and their details crisp. Yep. And it's I really like those. I could paint them. Don't know if I'd play the game, but so hopefully it sticks around. Mm-hmm. I like competition.
Yep.
So if Steamforge has a plan, there had to be a plan. I'm sure they got P3 for cheap because they didn't have much left. And they got the whole Iron Kingdoms IP. Mm-hmm. And maybe they'll do a Kickstarter to, hey, we're going to restart this, or we're going to make the kits for the factions that haven't been touched yet or whatever. Maybe they'll get something going in a couple of years here.
Yeah. So maybe welcome back War Machine.
Maybe.
So we'll see. But in the meantime, we need to go eat.
Colorful things.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Check out our new episodes every Friday on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible, or on Podbean. You can also follow myself and Llama on Instagram for more. We are at Hyena Paints Minis and at Llama Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.